pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Okay, Jenny David, absent. Roger Mayhew,
Yes.
Charles Wiltie,
Here.
Brenda Simmons,
Here.
Craig Scott.
Here.
Everybody have a chance to look at the agenda. I need a motion to, if there's any additions or deletions, please speak up now. If not, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? We have a chance for public comment right now on agenda items only. So if you have any public comment, please step forward and state your name and do your public comment. No public comments? Any public comment on Zoom? No public comment. Any appointments?
No.
No appointments. Discussion items are 4, 6, 7, there are 8 of them here. No, really 6. You have the readings of those, of these discussion items, MMP interlocal agreement. That's what Isabella County.
Right, so we'll take those one by one and we'll walk through them.
Okay, sounds great.
So the first one, the MMP, that's the material management plan that we're required to undergo, required under state statute. We had, I want to say in February, we had a meeting here with the Isabella County officials. Commissioner Scott and I have gone to Isabella County and toured their facility again. I've sat in a couple of their meetings already by Zoom. The group is officially forming now, and what you have in front of you is a cover memo and a draft interlocal agreement for all the participating counties. And you'll see right there on that first page who those participating counties are. Isabella would be coordinating it, but would also include Clare, Gladwin, Gratiot, Mecosta, Midland, and Ogemaw. There's also possibility, oh, there it is, Osceola. I was going to say I thought they were missing, but they're on the next page. There's a meeting of this group. I believe it's next Friday. We haven't got a time established yet. It's going to actually be held at Osceola County and Reed City, but they're doing all these by Zoom. So our transportation costs are obviously non-existent. We can sit in on Zoom and participate that way. Now, back you up to a couple of meetings ago, we had a July 6th deadline to let the state know or formally tell them what our plans were. And we said, we aren't prepared to do that, state, because you have yet to provide us with any guidelines. So we asked for an extension on that deadline. That extension was granted through August 31st. So there's no urgency to get this interlocal agreement approved like at the next meeting. Now, if you're satisfied with it, we can, but the urgency will actually come in August. By August 31, we'll need to be on record with the state with what we're doing. The proposal that you see in front of you was developed by our counsel, who's also legal counsel for a couple of these other counties. So they've already obviously reviewed it and are satisfied with its content. This will establish for the regional group, it will establish Isabella County as the designated planning agency. Now, we have our own designation for Ogemaw County, but for this regional, multi-county regional approach, they would be the coordinating agency. From where I sit, that's a very good thing, because that means we don't have to hire anybody. We don't have to try to do it ourselves and fit it into the schedule. They will take care of all of that component. That would include sending out an RFP for any planning assistance that we might need to comply with the statute. The memo itself gets into the cost of this, and it's not a real lengthy interlocal agreement as these things go. But the primary thing to draw your attention to is on the last page, where it talks about the funding for how this is going to work for each of these 8 counties. What is proposed and what we would agree to with this proposal that's in front of us is that a bulk of the state dollars that we would receive for doing this would be dedicated to the group. In other words, we'd be a pass-through agency, and we would send our grant money to the regional agency that will be preparing the plan. The formula looks like this. Over a 3-year period, the state will allocate $60,000 each of those years, all of the counties across the states. All 83 counties will receive that $60,000 grant. If we're part of a multi-county group, they will kick in an additional $10,000 for each county that participates. So for Ogemaw County, that means $70,000 for each of 3 years. Under this agreement, that would be passed through and would be sent right to the coordinating agency, the designated planning agency at Isabella County, for the purpose of developing the regional plan that would meet all of the requirements that the state has imposed in the statute that was passed. Now, keeping in mind that the driving force behind this is the initiative at the state level to increase recycling by a certain percentage by a certain year. So that is the focus of this. The planning component will require an analysis of what that waste stream looks like, estimates of what kind of revenue would be brought in as that waste is processed. And there's some other offsetting documentation that we'll have to do in terms of what this means to the overall waste stream and the, what's recycled and what isn't, so that we can prove that we've met those goals, or at least had the attempt to. So again, $70,000 for each of 3 years that would go to the regional agency. Now, there is another component to the formula. Each county will receive 50 cents per capita based on the 2020 census. So that's 50 cents per person that was counted in the census for Ogemaw County. And for our calculation, that works out to $10,385. That $10,385 would stay in Ogemaw County under this plan, and that would stay here to do any additional work that we might want to do. Now, we have a number of transfer stations, for instance, in the county. This money can be used to supplement their work to do separation of recyclables, for instance, or whatever concept that we come up with. But that's strictly for local use. Maybe we want to set up a drop-off facility, another one in West Branch someplace. These funds could be used for that. The money can only be used for this purpose. It can't be just put into the general fund and absorbed. It has to be used for that purpose. That's $10,385 that would also come each of those 3 years. So there would be, through the agreement with the state, we would sign on to receive that. Over 3 years, then the grand total for Ogemaw County is $241,155. That's what this agreement says, is that we will commit then to work with these counties. We will establish who our representative will be, which we've already done with Commissioner Scott, and that we would agree to participate in this process going forward for, it looks like, about 3 years. I anticipate they'll put out an RFP that will go to various engineering companies who, I'm trying to be polite about this, but who gear up for this kind of thing when it happens. We were doing solid waste management plans back in the 80s. We had a number of firms that would start to reach out as soon as the funding was released to say, hey, we've got the qualified personnel. We'll be happy to do these plans for you. I don't think it's going to be that hard to get people interested, because I think they're already waiting in the queue. Fortunately, again, for us, Isabella County will handle all the processing of the RFPs. We'll then present their findings to the regional group that would consist of Commissioner Scott representing Ogemaw County. And a decision moving forward will be made at that stage. These are pretty cut and dry in terms of what's required in those plans. The statute's very specific on what they want to see in terms of statistics, and then what they want those statistics to be used for. Can we add additional things to that? Certainly, but there's that minimum threshold that these funds are intended to make sure that we comply with. So even if we did this alone as our own plan, we are still required to come up with answers to each of those components that's in the statute. But again, if we got a regional program where Isabella County is coordinating that, it doesn't release us of our responsibility to make sure those criteria are met, but it certainly will save our staff time and the ability to have to go out for an RFP as a lone county, which may not be as attractive to the consultants to put this plan together. So that's what this is in a nutshell. Even though this memo was dated in May, it was actually July when it got to us. I want to say it was May. Yeah, it says May 23rd. I think they just was a typo on their cover memo. We didn't have all of the criteria lined up yet in May, so that wouldn't have been possible. But in any event, that's what we're being asked to consider. Now, I've read through the thing. I'm pretty satisfied that all of our concerns are addressed. There's even an opportunity if we get partway through the process and we decide, no, this isn't for us, with 1 month's notice, we can get out of it. Now, that means though that any commitments, fiscal commitments that were made while we were part of the regional group, we will still be responsible for paying for those. But if it's going in a direction we don't agree with and we're that adamant about it, we can pull out and then go back to, again, producing our own plan. Other than that, the material that you see in the agreement is fairly standard. There's the standard language of indemnification, which we see in all of our programs, but it does a very good job of specifically citing which components of the statute that we're meeting. And then what, again, assumes that all 8 of these counties will sign on. You'll see 8 different signature blocks on the agreement itself. So that's what this is in a nutshell. Again, try to answer any questions you might have.
If there's if there's a group that meets to put this plan together,
Right.
does every county have a vote,
Yes.
equal votes?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. And so they've also asked that each county designate a staff person, a staff contact, which is me in our case. So you really have 2 representatives of the county that are brought in for all of the meetings. All the decisions are made by that regional board, which will consist only of elected officials. Elected county officials, which is a good thing. And there will be ample opportunity if presentations need to be made. And at some point, we'll lead at least one presentation here, going through whatever the plan is at that point. And they're committing to do that as part of this agreement. But again, with Zoom, that's not going to be a problem. We could probably have them several times by Zoom. That's not an expense to anybody.
so for our county, it would be Craig then that would be on the board, it has to be elected.
Right.
That's good, somebody's got some education in that area for sure. Okay,
Tim, I have one question. A while back, we had talked about Saginaw County. Didn't they just do a bunch of work to their recycling facility? And they're kind of like the fiduciary of another group.
My understanding at Saginaw County, that's a privately held facility, and Commissioner Scott probably can speak better to it than I can. But as far as I can tell, the county's not coordinating that. It looks like it's the East Michigan Council of Governments that's coordinating for a number of counties in the east side of the state. I'm not sure Saginaw County has even signed on to that group yet. I've had really nothing, no contacts, no email or anything that's coming from there. We are required to notify the counties that touch us of what we're intending to do. And I'm starting to get those. Gladwin County obviously would be part of this, but they've sent theirs out already. I believe it was Aranac County and our county to the north, Oscoda, that is going with a Northeast Michigan group, which makes sense for them. But yeah, you're starting to see those commitments going around, but I've heard nothing out of Saginaw County at all. And again, I think it's a private facility.
Mobilization wise, I'm saying, straight down 75. It could really help with some costs, but. Okay.
Claire and Isabella, they're not down 75.
No.
No, you're
One point
working
five.
our way
Midland is-
through. Yeah,
We are the only 75 groupers here.
Yeah.
yeah, actually.
Yes, we are.
Do you have anything to add to this?
No, I just soon hang on here and see if somebody else is gonna pop up. I gotta think Roscommon. These people talked to Roscommon at one point. I think Roscommon or Crawford or Otsiegel's gonna take off with something. And then Aranac and Bay even.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see something come from that, but nobody's contacting us. I've got calls out to people I know in Saginaw area and I'm not getting responses.
The same result that I've gotten. It's
Yeah,
crickets.
so everybody's got to do it. So I don't know. But we got a month or better. I'd just hang on a couple more weeks and see what's going on.
Because that month will go fast.
Oh, sure.
What I'll do is just keep this on committee of the whole agenda until we made a decision. I don't want to lose track of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or past the deadline.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, 2 rounds of meetings yet that we'll have, before we absolutely have to commit. So.
Okay. Okay, and that's subject, everybody through, everybody else
Yeah.
satisfied with that?
Yep, good.
Okay, next one is utility expenditure trend.
Okay, you'll find on your iPads, there's a spreadsheet that shows by building what our utilities are. I want to take this a step further. I want to break it down so that we can see what utilities consist of electric, consumers, what's water, so that we can do get our minds around a little bit better what these numbers represent. But a couple of things strike me immediately. Between 21 and 22, we had quite an increase in the county building utility from 113,723 to 172,214. That's quite a jump in 1 year. But you'll also see a corresponding change at the jail where it went from 103,448 down to 80,349. And I know Tracy and I have talked about there were some of the bills that weren't exactly clear what they were. Until somebody had the time to sit down and try to figure it out. So I think that might be part of this. But I would note too that between fiscal year 23 and 24 to date, which is about 3/4 of the way of the fiscal year, in fiscal year 23, the jail utility cost was in total 63,523. And already in 24, we're at 81,387. So something's going on there that we'll want to kind of zero
If you
in.
remember, I came to you when I caught the problem and we made the journal entries to move it back as
Okay,
of October of this year, but I didn't go back to previous years only because the audits were done. It wasn't able
Right,
to
yeah.
change all that. So when I went to you, we decided to only go back to the October 1st of this year.
that makes
And I
sense.
actually did print the activity. You can see that there was no jail utility to consumers for many months. It was with staff changing and since Diana had left, things were getting done by different people by different ways. And I caught it when we were training the new girl, so.
Regardless, with all the utilities that we paid, there was a 14.25% jump between 21 and 22. That be curious. Again, I think we can get into the BSNA system and maybe figure out what caused that. Was it a rate increase?
We don't break down the different utilities, so we would have to pull each invoice. and
That's
separate
what I
them.
mean. When I say BSNA, I can click on that and I can see the invoice. So I'll be able to figure that out. But at the same time, from 22 to 23, we had a 1.2% decrease in the overall. So, interesting fluctuations. And I think we're well served to dive into this and just get our minds around what's going on. If there's anything we can do, to help with those costs, certainly we want to do that. But it's going to be interesting to see why, some of these changes occurred. And
Keep in mind, the auditors may move that first
Right.
back as well, so.
yes, those pesky journal entries, yes. But looking at the invoices themselves, I think we can get ourselves on a standard, looking at, energy usage, water usage, and so on, and come up with, I think, some, better idea what we have going on. No action needed. We just said we wanted to follow up on it, so.
So it sounds like some of the utility bills could have been consolidated with somebody else's utility bills on some of these trends.
I mean, any number of things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll untangle it.
Okay, next one's animal control program.
Okay, at the last, maybe the whole meeting, I think, maybe it was last week, we talked about the future of animal control. And I was asked to come up with 3 different scenarios. One that would be the status quo if we were to bring on another part-time animal control officer. What kind of expenses do we believe we needed? And that one's pretty easy because we budgeted for that this year. Scenario number 2, if that animal control officer were made full-time, what would that do to the costs? And then scenario number 3, a full-time animal control officer and a part-time animal control officer. Now, for this exercise, the easy part was coming up with the wages and benefits. Are we, obviously with a full-time person, we're adding the health insurance and retirement and so on. rough number on what that wage might be, you as a board would have to establish what that was. We did have an hourly rate for the part-time officer, but if we're going full-time, we're going full benefits, we'll want to take a look at that compared to neighboring counties and figure out what our market is. And then scenario number 3 really is just a combination of 1 and 2. We've got the part-time person, we got the full-time person, and these are the numbers. Now for revenue, I'm assuming the dog licenses will remain pretty steady. We're budgeted $15,000 in revenue. So that leaves, if we're going to do millage, the balance to be put in the form of a millage that would be placed in front of voters. You'll see toward the middle of the spreadsheet under animal care, just in recalling our conversations early on when we were talking about the original proposal that went out in May, it was roughly a $200,000 budget that we were thinking about for the animal care component. So that's the extent of the thinking that went into this number, just assuming that's what we're going to use going across the board to get the conversation going. So you see what the total expenditures are. And then I placed on the very last line what an estimated millage rate would have to be to fund this under these scenarios. Now, obviously, we need to do a little bit more work to make sure that we had all of the costs accounted for in here. But we're looking at range from a 0.2 mil for the status quo operation. For the full-time, we're at 254, and for the 3-person, the 1 full-time, 1 part-time, 0.282. I was a little surprised. I was thinking it was going to end up being a half a mil, but just looking at where our taxable value is and doing the arithmetic, these are the numbers that resulted. But again, I mean, obviously you're not ready to commit one way or another on this. We'd want to probably tweak this a little bit more, but for the sake of argument and for the purpose of meeting deadlines in early August for a November ballot, this is a good starting point. So roughly, this is what we'd be looking at.
How many hours a week did you put on for a part-time?
20.
20 hours.
What's the date in August that we'd have to?
I think it was the 12th.
I don't know that right.
It's coming soon.
Somewhere around there, yeah, it's coming soon.
So I mean, you
Right.
could
Yeah,
even
right
consider
around.
25 hours a week, it'd still be part-time.
Right.
I think actually the intent is right before the election, isn't it? And the language is due after.
I remember something like that, yeah.
Because people were talking whether the election's not even over yet, but you can file an intent and then withdraw, not submit.
Right.
So
I have it on my spreadsheet at home, the submitting dates, but I didn't bring that with me.
Yeah.
Okay, well, something to think about. But if we don't have the millage, I don't see this happening.
And we're going to talk about that later in the meeting,
Okay,
about funding for this and where things are headed here.
okay. I'll talk about the trees now.
Commissioner Wiltsey, I know, met with a
Brandstein.
group of people anyway to talk about those trees.
Yeah, so I think it was early last week, me and Brian pretty much walked the interior exterior of that would be the east side of the building. And didn't see any issues on the exterior at all, which was good. And then, of course, we started in the inside and where we had been told about in the women's bathroom there, and you can tell there's cracking, and who knows the last time that was caulked and painted, how many years ago. But other than that, then we went from there into the prosecutor's office and along there, and no cracking in the foundation. There is a window that's got a small leak, but I'm quite sure that's more of a caulking issue that needs to be addressed. Because they've had some windows in the past that had some issues and it needed to be resealed,
I think they all need to be resealed, to be honest with you. I mean, when the wind blows and the curtains go like this, it kind of tells me that wind's getting through there.
Yeah. I mean, that would be something that we definitely could look at is, for sure when it comes to trying to see what type of money we're gonna spend for cost savings for utilities. That would be an item to look at. But so Brian, he took a good hard look at it and he feels very confident that there's no issues structurally with the building from those tree roots that are between the sidewalk and the building. And we literally did not find another area where, anything was cracking or anything. I think that woman's bathroom it's been a real long time since there's been work done there. I think it just needs some attention.
But it's been noticed recently. It wasn't noticed before. I mean, this cracking up there has been noticed recently. So,
Yeah, again, we didn't see it anywhere else,
nowhere else in the building?
nowhere else along that side of the building,
Okay,
inside.
okay.
I asked Brian, I said, do you think we should try to bring in a professional,
Engineer.
another professional like, as an engineer, or even just a concrete guy in the area that, deals with these every day. And he felt that there was no reason for it.
Okay. Any other comments about the trees?
Are we gonna keep them or are we getting rid of them?
I didn't get close enough to the trees to know to look at their
Getting
health.
away from mowing the grass and
I mean,
that was something.
From what
that
I'm
was said.
seeing, I don't see any problems with the trees.
Okay.
And the only one to be able to answer that's the guy that rides the lawnmower.
I'm sure he'd like them out of the way.
I'm sure he would, because I don't like mine either. Okay, third quarter budget adjustments. Just a little hand.
You'll maybe want to follow along on the iPads. There's a number of them. I don't necessarily need to get into the greater detail of every single one of these, but a few of them they are worthy of greater attention. They're more than just superficial change. The first page is the revenues for the general fund, and we'll hit the general fund and then the special funds. And I'll say this, for third quarter, I was surprised that there weren't more. And that tells me you may have seen through the emails when departments are making adjustments, that has picked up this year. So that's kind of nice. The departments are really paying attention to these lines and moving funds around and not waiting till the last minute, which is exactly what our auditors had hoped would happen. Going through the revenue side, just some major changes here. The first one, we received what's called a Title III Bankhead Jones USDA grant for $7,400. That's new revenue. The local community stabilization, you might have heard me rant about this a little bit. I still can't quite figure out what the state is doing to determine how much each county is entitled to receive. But right now we have roughly $8,800 more in revenue than what we had projected, even after our last adjustment. That's good news. I just wish I understood how they were doing this and then we could predict it a little bit better about what's happening. But that's on the positive side. One other large one, the convention facilities liquor tax was $17,500 more. That is it, I believe, for the year. I don't think we're going to receive any more funding, and this is split up. Half of it goes to the Michigan Drug Rehabilitation Group. It's a regional group that we're a part of, and by statute it has to go there, and by statute the balance of that is used to help offset any kind of jail costs that we might have. One major difference, as we were working through this last quarter, the treasurer came to me and said, you cannot put the secondary road patrol officer in the road patrol millage fund, which is what we've done this year to put all of our road patrol into one basket, if you will. And when we did that, we brought the revenue for the secondary road patrol grant over to the millage as well. And then the millage was paying the difference between the two because the secondary road patrol grant does not cover that full position. Well, the treasurer, believes that that's not something that would pass muster at audit time, and that we shouldn't be commingling the two in that way. There is disagreement on that, but I don't really care to argue the point. It doesn't matter to me as long as the intent is made. So what we've done with these adjustments is brought that secondary road patrol division or activity back to the general fund, brought the grant revenue back to the general fund as well, and brought over some of the road patrol millage fund as well with this adjustment, offset that cost that the grant doesn't cover. This was completely acceptable to the treasurer, and to me, 6 and 1/2 dozen of the other. It accomplishes the same thing. The idea was to relieve the general fund of the difference between what the grant pays for and what the activity actually cost. So that's what that $59,000 adjustment is all about.
Yep.
So moving down on treasurer services, the treasurer has collected significantly more in fees. So there's that adjustment. The same is true with the land division line for equalization. Another large one, the district court filing fees are up, as are the district court bond forfeiture costs. That's a revenue, and the copies and forms and records also an increase. So overall at the district court, an increase of $7,100 in revenue. The sheriff's office, a couple of major ones. Marijuana licensing fees are higher already than what was projected in the budget. That likely will get adjusted again after the fourth quarter. There is a bulletproof vest grant that came in, so that'll be added to the agenda. But another big one is the revenue sharing for public safety, $6,872 greater than what we had originally budgeted. So you see that adjustment. In the school resource officers, the revenue for the West Branch Rose City is up by $4,329. So you'll recall the invoices that the sheriff has sent for the additional overtime. That's what that represents. And another $936 at Whittemore Prescott.
Was that bill now?
Yes.
Has it been received?
Yes. Well, it's received because we see it already in our third quarter. Yep. Some others there is.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. And jump down to the tether program. There was a work release tether revenue that's carried over. It's one of those legacy revenues that's carried over budget to budget. Working with the undersheriff, that hasn't generated any revenue for a few years now. I believe, I don't want to speak for them, but came down to when we when we got into that whole COVID situation, work release ended as just about everything else did with COVID, and it just hasn't restarted. And there are some other dynamics involved there that make that a little less doable at this point. So we're just going to face the reality. We're not going to say that revenue's coming. We know it's not going to. It's being taken out. Your secondary road patrol, you can see that's that secondary road patrol grant monies coming back in. For marine enforcement, there was a reduction in the grant that we received this year. So that's what you're seeing on that. Next up with corrections, the reimbursement for medical care for inmates. I've lowered that. It could conceivably go up again. We just don't know what kind of medical issues our inmates are going to have that might be reimbursed. But right now the trend is pointing down. So you see that adjustment. Under board and care of dogs revenue under animal control. This was a program that Scott was going to hope to start up, but obviously he is not here any longer. So the likelihood of him doing that is not very great anymore. So we'll take that revenue out. Under the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission revenue is up. Must be pretty active over there. So you see that change. And so the total change in revenues is $168,502.99 increase in revenue. Moving down now to the expenditures, a couple of items on the Board of Commissioners activity. The first one is the retirement, the defined contribution plan. Looks like that's going to need about $4,000 less than we budgeted, and the same with retirement, just based on the current trends. Continuing down,
Excuse me just a second.
Okay.
Could you go back to planning, explain that one more time for me?
Their revenues are up, and I don't know if that's land use permits or if it's actual zoning change requests that are going on, but they've been taking in additional revenue. So we're showing that now in the adjustment. Okay.
And how much is that increase?
The budget adjustment will be $4,000. Right now, they're at $13,739 on the year. We budgeted $10,000. The $13,739 is at 75% of the year, so we'll likely be adjusting that upward again after the fourth quarter, assuming all of their trends continue.
Okay, thank you, because I misunderstood what you were saying.
And the other one is Zoning Board of Appeals revenue, and that's the application fees for the Zoning Board of Appeals. That may or may not fluctuate anymore. Just depends on if anybody has any variance requests that they want to approach the commission with. And some minor adjustments in the insurance and bonds, and that's all self-contained. It doesn't result in any change in the bottom line. Same with the treasurer. There was we hadn't budgeted enough, we believe, for the part-time position, but we had over budgeted under health insurance, so that makes it an easy swap. But because those are personnel line items, they have to come through this board, and we do these with the quarterlies. A large increase in expense is under elections. That's a $46,076.99 increase in the budget allocation. Keeping in mind, though, that we also know that some of these expenses are going to be reimbursed at the state. We just don't know what that number is yet. So when we get to the fourth quarter, that additional revenue will be plugged in, and it will help even some of that out. Another large adjustment downward under buildings and grounds. We're pretty confident now there'll be no more snow between now and the end of the fiscal year on September 30th. So it's pretty confident that we can reduce that expenditure by $16,200. So spent less than half of what we budgeted for snow removal this year. Next one, under probate court, under those expenditures, we appear to have over budgeted for retirement, so reducing that by $20,000. I do want to get with the probate court administrator with Michael on this, because I think there's something going on with the juvenile officer at probate. Right now, we would need to adjust this budget by $18,000 for that pay, but I think there's something going on there with state reimbursement, and I just want to clarify before I put this in the form of a resolution. So I'm just going to skim through the rest of these. I don't think we need to hit a great deal. You will see the increase in the secondary road patrol and that it's been brought over. Next one with corrections. I do want to get with the undersheriff to confirm some of these figures. I know it's been sort of a moving target, but the good news is the adjustments right now are all contained within the activity. It's not necessarily requiring any additional expenditure. Animal control making the adjustment now, knowing that we don't fill the position through the end of the year. We know what those expenses are, and so that's an $8,800 reduction. So the bottom line on all of this, $168,000 in new revenues, but $190,000 in new expenditures. Keeping in mind that roughly $46,000 of that was on the elections, which likely will see some offset with some state revenue. That's, however, a $22,000 swing in the wrong direction. But again, with the state reimbursing, that probably will level right out. So projecting fund balance right now at the end of the year, $296,997.
I have a question.
Huge, but it's again, movement in the right direction.
I saw someplace where the commissary fund was in the hole, 42,000 some odd dollars. Is that true?
Well, it's
how did that happen?
on paper right now, it will look like that. We'll get to the special funds next.
Okay,
But keep in mind that we're only 3/4 of the way through the fiscal year.
but how did-
Treasurer has already made the transfer for the full year, the transfer that we budgeted from commissary over to the general fund to offset some of the jail costs. So it's, we've moved that money now. If we had only moved 75% of it, I don't think you'd see a deficit. The jail continues to, commissary continues to function, and it will still generate its revenue. So it's, while it may look bad now, it's not as alarming as it might seem.
I was just surprised to see it in the negative.
Where'd they move it
to?
We had budgeted 225,000 to be moved to the general fund. And rather than wait till the end of the year to do that, the treasurer's made all those adjustments now. So it's not just commissary, but all the other funds where, the CPL fund had $10,000 come over as well. There are a couple of others. What has happened historically is that movement, if it took place at all, it was waited at the very end of the year. And it has generally been the auditor coming in and making those changes or making that move. Well, we don't need to do that. We don't need to have the auditor do that. We've already know what we've got budgeted for it. So treasurers have gone ahead and taken that step now rather than wait. It's important to wait till the end of the year, though, before we say, oh, this was a deficit. I don't think it's going to be if the revenues all come in as projected and they all appear to be on all those funds that are being transferred. There shouldn't be any issue. Okay, just running through the special funds quickly, some very minor things in friend of the court, their marriage and counseling. The land bank has a few adjustments. Each of these funds, again, is very self-contained. So in no instance are we running a deficit in any of these funds. It's just moving the funding around to where the expenses have fallen. Another one that I'll be talking to the other undersheriff about is under the marriage fund with the vacancies that are there now. We know that we won't be spending everything that we budgeted under wages because of those vacancies. And so I want to make sure that we're distributing those funds accordingly. Most of these are very small amounts. Running through. Large one was the opioid settlement. We had an additional $10,000 in settlement money coming, so we'll have to make that adjustment. The rest of them are relatively small. The jail bond payment, it's just a matter of where we budgeted the line for the payments, and you'll see there that it's a swipe. The $64,000 in interest is going from one line to the other just to make sure that we've accounted for it accordingly, but the bottom line impact is zero. The other large one, you'll want to take a look at county parks. There's just some adjustments. Again, everything falling within what our expenditures were, but just some activity that's gone on there that's required some of the adjustments. Primarily, one of the large ones is utilities at looks like 751, which would be the RV park. Some utility work went on there. Deer feed is substantially more this year than what we had budgeted, but that's all again within the activity itself. And then the other one that I'll have you take a look at, just draw your attention to, is in transit. And this is no large surprise, but you'll see like a major expenses that are associated with the new building. So the final draw has come in for that. You see it in here. All of those funds that you see there were grant funds that were put in a designated area of the fund balance for transit. So this is what those monies were intended to. We're now moving it into the budget because we have the invoices to pay. So nothing very exciting there. Again, each of the funds is balanced or projected to have surplus. Then what I'll do is put this all in the form of a resolution. It'll kind of consolidate it a little bit so you don't have to look at 20 pages on each of these to figure out what's going on. But it's good for you to see the line items so that when you see that summarized resolution, you can go to those line items and see exactly how those movements are happening. And right now, it looks like that'll be the only action item next Thursday.
Well, I think we ought to be looking at that cash sum again. Question next Thursday.
Could you explain that a little bit more, Commissioner?
Well, we decided not to vote on it last week. I think we should bring it back up and vote on it next week.
All right. Any other comments about third quarter budget adjustments?
No, not about
Not right now.
Okay, let's go over the 2025 budget.
Okay. I have walked through this proposal with the budget committee on the general fund and with the department heads on Monday. So this has been circulating. Today is the day when this was due on our budget calendar. But again, we're able to finish that general fund one up early and already start circulating that. The special funds are brand new. They're seeing the light of day for the first time here today. I'll walk through these right now to just give you the gist of what I proposed. Bearing in mind that you are not required to make a decision until September. So literally you have all of August yet to work on budgets and into September. You don't have to wait till December. If you get to a point where you're satisfied with the figures for where they are for 25, you can go ahead and hold the hearing ahead of September if you wish. But as we walk through this, there are just a number of things yet that obviously are still on the table, needing discussion. You certainly won't be approving this next week. But again, we've got plenty of time yet. None of this is cast in stone. This is merely a recommendation. None of this happens until you vote to say it happens, right? Working on the general fund, and I do have copies if anybody's wanting to follow along. These spreadsheets. So
Look at general now.
start with the general. Couple of points to keep in mind. First of all, the compensation rates that you see here, that's what we pay the employees. All 5 of our bargaining units are going to negotiate contracts between now and hopefully the end of the fiscal year. And it would not be proper to plug in any number right now other than what we already see for pay rates. So what we're paying right now in fiscal 24 are the numbers that you see here. That's subject to bargaining, and we respect that. We will bargain those rates with each of the unions. So we'll plug in any new numbers until then. But keeping in mind, that being the case, in all likelihood, the wage numbers are going to be higher than what you're seeing here. And that's, again, part of working through this whole process. And again, glad that we have all of August and September as we go through bargaining to establish what those are before we have to adopt a budget. So keeping that in mind, you're not seeing any increases there. The health insurance numbers that you see are accurate because we already know what the hard cap rates are. They've been established by the state, so those we're confident in. The only movement you'll see there is if an employee switches between a single person plan and a family plan or back and forth. Those things happen throughout the year, but you won't see any difference in terms of what the rates are. Now, walking down through here, and I apologize, I thought I had put the page numbers on the general fund. And it didn't make it on here, so I guess I just didn't save that part of it, but I'll add those later, so any future spreadsheets that you see, at least we'll have page numbers to work with. The first items to talk about, on the very first page, a few lines down, we have the marijuana annual license. This is a new revenue for the county. This is new this year. We've already received $59,086, and this is a formula that's determined by the state. If you want to establish a marijuana shop, then you are obligated to pay certain taxes to the state, which are then distributed back to the local communities. I expect this is going to go up. I, for now, have a placeholder of $65,000. In review of how other counties have functioned, that probably is going to be more than that. So that's a number that you might see move up before you are asked to actually adopt a budget. 2 other items. The first is that local community stabilization. I budgeted $150,000. Right now, anybody's guess at how that formula works. I'll continue to try to figure that out,
Grant or just,
it's a grant and it's an automatic one. We don't have to do anything. The state sends it. And what they, I thought, with that title, part of that was our incentive to make sure that we had our webpage updated that shows things like our trends for our retirement that would be on there, and just other basic trends of government and financing. But the state dropped that requirement this year, so I again don't know, exactly what is the formula the state's using. So I'll continue to try to figure it out so that we have a little firmer of an idea. You can see this year we only budgeted $50,000 for that, but at the end of the quarter, we'd already seen 217,000 come in. So at least it's moving in the right direction. But I was burned on that the year before when we budgeted something like 150,000 and less than 100,000 came in. Just don't know what they're doing to figure that out. And I don't know if it's a population based or if it's SEV based. I just don't know. The next item is the revenue sharing number. I have plugged in the increase at 622,690. I've been trying to locate exactly how that's broken down by the state, and was a little hardened to find out that the state hasn't released that yet. But it seems to be founded on what the governor's proposal was, which broke revenue sharing down into three categories now. There is the traditional revenue sharing that we've seen year after year, and that received something like a 5% increase, but there are two other components to it. Any county that has dedicated or already designated all of its ARPA funds is eligible for an additional 3.5% on our revenue sharing. Well, we did that. We did that when we passed the resolution at the advice of the U.S. Department of Treasury. Just said this is lost revenue. That's the wording that was used in the ARPA Act. What that really came down to is any community that received less than $10 million in ARPA money, Department of Treasury realized across the country, a lot of communities were in that category, and all of those communities would be required to submit pretty detailed documentation to the federal government subject to audit. Well, just think about the counties alone. There are over 4,000 counties in the country. Vast majority of them received less than $10 million, like Ogemaw. I don't think the federal government really wanted to see 4,000 reports come in from counties that they would then have to review and confirm spending was within the guidelines. Now, 4,000 counties, but all of those counties have cities and villages. So 4,000 times whatever that number is. In Michigan alone, there are over 500 cities and villages that also received ARPA monies and townships. That's just a load of paperwork coming into the federal government, and vast majority of them under 10 million as well. So long story short, we passed a resolution early in the process following the guidelines of the federal government and said this is all considered lost revenue. That's the end of the discussion. As far as anybody is concerned, those monies are now allocated, and in this case, it means 3.5% more in revenue sharing. One other piece to this is a percentage that will be dedicated to law enforcement. And that's new. I don't know if that will continue year to year, but an additional, I want to say it's $11,000, but I'm not sure. Still waiting on the state to tell us exactly what that number was, but that's to offset costs of law enforcement. We have a sheriff's office, therefore we qualify for that. So once those numbers are established anyway and put out by the state, we'll definitely be plugging them in here. Two items I draw your attention to at the bottom of that first group, the revolving fund and the ARPA monies. We said there would be no revenue from those sources this year. This budget proposal does not include any revenue from those two sources. So keeping true to what we had discussed. The transfer from the Road Patrol Millage Fund is mentioned in the quarterly adjustments to offset the cost of the secondary road patrol grant. On the second page, under insurance and bonds, I have plugged in an increase for the umbrella. Hopefully, within the next 10 days, we'll have an RFP on the street. This is the year that we bid that out. We wanted to do it every 3 years, and so now is the time. So that will go out. That one I'm a little leery of. It could be higher, even in your own experiences, your homeowner's insurance and auto insurance have begun to trek upward, just based on natural disasters they tell us across the country. We have forest fires, tornadoes, hurricanes, whatever it might be. Everybody is seeing increases. I don't understand the increases.
So Tim, you're switching over to expenditures now.
Yeah.
Okay, but comment on revenues. So we're seeing a downturn on revenue. We're projecting.
No, you're seeing just part of the revenue here. The way the system puts the spreadsheets out, you'll see when we get to, let me see if I can find one here. The first one that pops up on the bottom of the third page is the treasurer. And there are lines for the treasurer for revenue, and then there are expenditures as well. So you're not seeing all at once.
Is there a total revenue number?
There
someplace?
is. And there will be toward the end of my conversation.
Okay.
I'll tell you where that is, because it's important with the fund balance discussion.
Okay, all right.
Okay, jumping over now to buildings and grounds. And we've stated all along that this budget year would entail some difficult decisions, and this is the first one of great substance that is in the general fund. This budget proposes reduction of our custodian staff by 1. Now, recall back in 2000, might have been 2021, we did increase this staffing level primarily in response to COVID. So at the time, we anytime that we had an employee who declared to have COVID, we went through a pretty vigorous cleaning process, sanitizing offices and literally closing the door on them for a few days. Recommended at the time. And knowing that that would entail, additional workload on the staff, we added increased the custodian staff. Then this budget reduces that by 1 person. Again, all of this up for discussion, nothing cast in stone at this time, but that's the first major reduction that you see on the personnel side.
I guess on that, I'd like to know how 1 person is going to take care of all those buildings.
Yeah. It's going to mean anybody occupying an office is going to have to pick up some of the slack. So for instance, in my office, I end up vacuuming my own floor rather than waiting for somebody to come around. You could even take your own trash to the main dumpster if we needed to do that. But that's something we'll have to work through yet. Absolutely, to determine what will be the priority for the custodial staff and what we'll do as our own responsibility. Next one to talk about under district court. As you know, we've been working under an arrangement for the district court administrator right now, sharing that position, if you will, with Roscommon County. I want to sit down with the court and talk to them about their intentions moving forward, what they envision. They envisioned, it looks like to me, district court administrator position being in here, but so far we've not had any communication from the court saying they're going to move, do anything different than what they are. Did talk to the district court administrator. We'll sit down with the court and we'll strategize. Now, the court had originally last year had proposed a movement to take on the lien responsibility as the court, and that would entail additional training, reassignment, and so on. But there is potential, if that happened, to actually save us some money, because right now there's a fee that goes to 911 to do that, and they do it on their schedule. I know the judge is uncomfortable with that arrangement because they have responsibilities at the court to do certain things in a timely fashion. And by sending that off to somebody else, they can't guarantee those things are happening when they need to happen. So again, I want to have those conversations yet with the district court, find out where they're wanting to go with this, cost it out, and probably adjust these numbers accordingly.
I have a question to ask. And I need to ask for it yet. I would say over the last 10 years, and they haven't lost anybody, the courts haven't. The caseload is decreased significantly. I mean, significant. So I don't know why they still have to have the same staff they had 10 years ago when the caseload was a lot larger.
That will be part of the conversation.
Well, it better be a good conversation.
Yeah. And actually, it's the two commissioners who are on the budget committee. I'll let you know when we're gonna do that. And maybe you want to sit in on that.
I would like to sit on that, yes.
It'd be very appropriate. Next, I'd mentioned at the budget committee meeting and the department heads, under prosecuting attorney, there is a component in the state budget where they call it the prosecuting attorney incentive, where it looks like when you read the language, there would be some monies distributed to all counties to help with cost of prosecuting attorney's office. But on a deeper dive, it appears that all of the monies that's set aside will go to 11 counties with the highest crime rates in the state. Well, as you might expect, the usual suspects are there: Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, Ingham, Kent, those larger counties. Genesee are sort of the target for those revenues. Now, oddly enough, Kalkaska County is included in that. A county roughly our size is one of the top 11. There is some movement on our behalf out of MAC to say, you know, all counties are experiencing stress on their prosecuting attorney staff, and it might be a better option to distribute those funds across all counties rather than selecting those specific counties. Don't know how far that'll get, but there's, you know, potential anyway of some additional funding coming in. The Prosecuting Attorneys Association is also, you know, getting a hold of legislators and saying, look, you know, it's not proper to just, you know, again, select those counties. You should be sending that across to all counties. And part of the argument is when they distributed the indigent defense funds across the state, all counties received that, but all prosecuting attorneys' offices saw an increase in volume of their workload because now you had the court-appointed attorneys who were there, who were actually doing the job.
All these appeals.
So they were stepped up their game, I guess, for lack of another word. So there is some pressure there. So maybe we'll see some movement at that point. State's budget has to be adopted at the same time ours is. So we'll just keep our ear to the ground, and whatever transpires, we'll make sure we account for it. Hopefully there'll be additional funding coming our way. Next is the sheriff's office. The first item, there's a vehicle purchase that was in the sheriff's proposal, but this is the USDA revenue that's showing here, but the expenditure was in the Road Patrol millage fund. So this is taken out of here and will be considered as part of that package, which I'll get to in a second. But that's why that's reduced in the recommended budget.
So all that car then basically be coming out of the grant and the road patrol millage.
It would, but there's another wrinkle in this. With the proposal that I put together here, I removed a deputy from the general fund and moved that over to the road patrol millage fund as well. So the sheriff's office would consist of the sheriff, the undersheriff, and the secretary. All of the deputies, if you will, would be in the road patrol millage fund. That impacts whether or not we can swing purchase of a vehicle or not, but I'll talk about that because there's some nuance to that as well. But that's the reason why. So I'm moving a person over.
But my understanding was when you buy that, and the sheriff would know that more than I would, that when you purchase that vehicle, that doesn't include all the stuff that goes in that vehicle, does it?
The project that was in there included all that,
Okay,
Right.
55, 40.
okay.
So moving on to the next one, mentioned the secondary road patrol as well, so that obviously carries over.
What bumped the revenues? Oh, wait a minute. Gotta go back to my headings here.
Yeah.
Review budget, okay, all right, hold on. We should have headings in there a little more often than just on the top page.
Again, I thought I did when we worked.
I agree
through
with
the
that.
Special funds, you'll see it actually happened and you'll see
All
how
right.
much better it is. You know, when it's on there.
Now I gotta bounce back and forth.
Yeah,
I think I forgot to save it or something after I
good
did.
idea.
But we still see an increase, considerable increase over last year.
Expenditures?
Revenue. Is that mainly because of that USDA number? That looks like it. Because it wasn't there
Part
last.
of it, but look at that revenue sharing line. That's accounting for, again, that revenue sharing formula that hopefully the state will tell us exactly what those numbers are.
All right.
A large increase there.
That's a $10,000 increase too. Okay.
So the next item, oh, go ahead.
But then when we're in expenditures, we're not reducing that much.
We're not, and the main reason for that comes back to our old friend, legacy retirement cost.
Yeah.
Let me find that again. So this year, well, it's coming up in the command officer retirement. And that's where we're seeing the big increase. Now, you recall earlier this year, we closed that division, which we thought was done in 07, but wasn't. And when we closed the division, the calculations change and we are anticipating a couple of retirements, meaning there will be no active employee putting into this anymore.
Right.
That doesn't mean MERS gets less. That means we pick up that balance.
Right.
And so that's been programmed in here. I still would like to take this out of all the individual departments and put them in under one heading, under 175. It's a general county expense. And to put this into the individual department budgets like this just throws it off. It's not a real number. It's a legacy cost that we know we have to pay. It's just like postage. It's just like the copy machine lease. It's one lease. And to put that, assign it to a department like this, I think skews the bottom line when we start talking about the actual expenditure of the department. You know, draw your attention to two others, the Register of Deeds. Denise was in here and said, you know, I really only have control over about $5,000 in that budget. And that's true because everything else is set. But one big number there is the legacy retirement costs, right? Those defined benefit plans. Prosecuting attorneys, another one. And I hear from district court, I mean, there are over $200,000 budgeted to district court for that, for nothing that's happening in the district court. This is just
Right.
payments that were promised over the years.
Right.
And so I'm hoping to get an answer from Treasury, who was very intrigued by the question about the ability to account for it in the budget as a single line. And then we can obviously track it a lot easier that way too. It's all in one place and we can, you know, get a better idea of where our commitments are. Not sure where this all started. I don't know if it started with the auditors, but even the auditors kind of scratching their heads saying, yeah, why can't you do that? It would make everything easier for everybody. So I don't know, maybe I've opened a can of worms. We'll see. We have to account for it anyway in some place. So right now this budget contemplates just continuing to account for it as we have. And in this case, that unfortunately looks like a huge jump for the sheriff. That really isn't a huge jump. It's just a legacy cost.
So what we have to do is find out what the audit requirements are on that, if we can do it one lump.
Yeah, the auditor actually is favorable to doing it, but they don't want to do it unless they get, you know, the go ahead from Treasury that they're going to accept it that way. We don't want an audit rejected, especially over something like that. So I'm kind of waiting on the contact we have with Treasury to give us an answer.
I think it makes sense.
It does make sense, but
Yeah.
government, you know.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. The next item is the jail budget. We've been talking about this for a while now. The numbers that you see here are implementing the lockup plan, if you will. So the plan that would send inmates over to Roscommon County for housing on the 24/7, but that would require a rotation of employees moving inmates from Roscommon to Ogemaw and back, particularly making sure that all the different court hearing requirements are met and so forth. So this budget does that. We still need to have conversations. In fact, we have a meeting set up next week. Yeah, next week on the 23rd to talk to some of the stakeholders yet about how this might work. But this budget contemplates that, and that would mean reducing the staff at the jail down to 6, rotating persons throughout the day, and taking obviously the inmates over to Roscommon.
I have a comment. Before you continue on that venue right now. Are you sure we're gonna be able to take the inmates over there?
Well, that's the next step, and if you are agreeable, you could direct, you don't need to do any formal action, but send myself and the law enforcement committee to begin literally negotiating with Roscommon County on a contract. We both have developed the framework of a draft contract, so we'll actually hit the ground running. But now would be the time, if we're going to do this, to start nailing down things like the rates and other obligations that each party would have.
I've heard, and you know how things go, I've heard that option might not be available to us anymore. Can you check with them to find out if that's?
I had a conversation with the administrator on Monday and given absolutely no indication that they're going to do anything but work with us at this point. Because we've had those conversations, they know. So I'll call again and make sure, but.
I just wonder if they're gonna have room for us. That's my
Well,
question.
that being said, I don't know that we want to sit on this much longer. If we're really going to do this, it's time now to start that conversation on a serious level with Roscommon. We've had the informal meetings and, talked about, how the framework generally would be, but now would be the time to begin locking some of this stuff down so that we know if we're going to do this and we want to do it by October 1, things have to move.
It's moving way too slow for my little self.
What are your thoughts about that, though? Are you comfortable with us having that level of conversation now as a board? Again, you're not committed to do anything, but we're going to need to know what these parameters are. We're going to need to have absolute certainty. And
I just need to have
make sure
absolute
that
certainty that Roscommon is still in agreement to take these. You know how rumor control is. I just need to have that rumor control satisfied within myself
Exactly.
that they're still gonna take them.
Well, now's the time because we're developing our budget. If we're not going to do that, then these numbers.
I want to do it, but can they still do it is my question. Because I'm not
Right
so
now,
sure they can.
from all indications that I have, yes, but we haven't signed anything yet. We haven't committed to a thing. And so it's not cast in stone until we've done that.
Can you call them tomorrow? I'm just real nervous about this. And when you hear something like that, it's like,
Yeah, we can, now certainly as a minimum, we'll make the call. But at the same time, I don't want to get in front of the board if you don't want to have the real.
Have a resolution put on for next meeting. Let's have a resolution to go forward or backward, whatever.
thank you.
Let's have an official vote.
can they handle all the people we have?
Well, again, with the conversations we've had so far, they say yes. But if there's another county in play, this is what we need to know.
We need the officials. Let's go ahead and do this.
Yes, that's what we need. Thank you, Craig.
Next item I want to talk about is the planning budget. This budget is status quo for 25, but planning and zoning is a function that's not mandated. If you're going to do it, there are statutes that we have to follow, but the county's not mandated to have a zoning ordinance, not mandated to have a master plan. We don't do planning for all of the townships. Is it 2 townships or 3?
2 in the city.
2 in the city do their own now. But the county does it for the others, and it makes perfect sense. And honestly, I support that model. It makes sense. At the same time, the townships that are served aren't contributing anything to the effort at all. There's no agreement that says we'll do this for you. We just, under the county planning and zoning acts, we do it. What I'd like to have us do over the next year is it's just not time right now to do it for an October 1 stop. But to begin conversations with each of those townships and entertain the thought of an agreement with them where they pay into the cost to help offset these costs. If the county doesn't do this, each of the townships has the authority to do it. But does it make sense for each of those townships to set up their own planning commissions, establish their own zoning administrator, and each of them do their own thing, have their own set of rules? A lot of counties operate that way, but this is one county that doesn't. It does make sense, I think, to consolidate their efforts. So even by contributing to offset this roughly $90,000, the amount that a township would have to pay is far less than establishing their own programs. All this being said, there's nothing that would compel the township to agree to do that. They might just say, nope, never mind, we just won't do planning and zoning. I think that would be a terrible decision, but it would be their decision to make. So it's a little bit risky in that sense. But at the same time, we are in a position right now fiscally where we've got to look at all of these options and ask ourselves, is this a function that we should be doing, or should this be a local function? I think this is a good compromise. I don't think our townships would reject it out of hand, but at the same time, they're going to want to see some accountability for any contributions that they do make to the effort. So that would take some time to develop those agreements. And I would like to see us do that during the year, during fiscal year 25, so that when we're here next year talking about the fiscal year 26 budget, we know whether or not we're going to have that participation and work that revenue into our budget and work on those agreements to get them signed. Now, you could say we aren't going to do this anymore. That's perfectly within the realm of what the board can do. But that would also mean repealing the zoning ordinance, because you would have nobody to enforce it. You would have nobody issuing permits. You've got nothing, no way to enforce the ordinance that would be on the books yet.
Not a good idea.
You don't want the obligation sitting there and you not following up on it. So that's a discussion perhaps for the 26 budget. I would think that's a good thing to just establish now, that that's our intent over the next year, is to look at this option and decide what we want to do.
Like everybody's hurting for money. So with some of these townships that are very small, not very big, could be a big additional cost to their budget. And they may not be able to afford to do that.
And that's part of the process. So we look at what their finances look like and kind of help us determine whether or not that's even a viable option. We don't want to put a township in a bad spot either.
Right, okay.
But maybe there's some other hybrid. Maybe the county still contributes something to it to help offset. For a township, maybe they can't quite make it go. But we've got a lot of things that we can consider to help make it happen.
If-
But I think it's be a mistake for us to just continue status quo and not think about these things.
Understand, but I don't want, like you said, I don't want to put a township in a bad financial situation either, over something like that.
I sat on a planning commission for a number of years, and I've been on a township planning commission. And I've said that it's not, you can't have townships need to collect together and have their own planning. We're making up rules for all sides. We can only make one rule, and it has to apply to the whole county.
Yeah.
You got Foster Township up there that's got one farm in it. You got Logan Township out there that's got one lake in it. Okay, one lake with recreation on it, and you got Foster Township got one farm, but we got to make one rule that applies to the whole county. Now, these townships that have high recreation areas and low farming, they should get together and set their own planning. They can do it jointly. They don't have to rely on the county.
I understand that, but I think the county also has in theirs that addresses all those situations.
Well, every township out there's got a fund balance. This county doesn't.
I understand that,
So
but
who's broker?
some townships are very,
Who's
very,
broker?
very, very small. And it would be very harmful, could be very harmful to them.
But if they put in, will they get part of the revenue?
Well, no, they wouldn't get revenue. They'd get the service of having a planning commission. They're buying a service.
Just a question. I
I'm
mean,
just- I'm-
if you're gonna take their money,
Well, we're already providing the service
absolutely.
to them for free. Okay,
But if you charge them,
then we would be charging for services we're already rendering. Which we
But-
probably should have did a long time ago.
but do you see what I'm saying? If they're paying, they're not gonna get no chance of their money back.
No, they're buying a service. Right, I buy a service. If I pay for a service, I pay for a service. I don't get any money back for it.
I do think it would be proper though for us when we do our fees review each year. That the townships would have a voice in that process.
I
So
would
if they
hope
need to
so.
offset some of their costs, you increase a fee on, you know, zoning hearing permits or whatever. But they could have a voice in that and help, you know, help us decide what would be an appropriate fee for those services.
Because some of these townships are pretty small.
Optimally, it'd be great if they paid the whole 90 grand, but if we could get $10,000 out of, we're talking 12 townships in a city, Rose City. So you have 13 entities. That's less than 1,000 apiece.
That's something.
I
for
don't
the
think
future
that's
you
killing
wanna-
anybody.
That's something for the future you want. to
Right, that's something we do.
I think we should do over the next year.
Yeah.
Well,
and
I
get
just
all
wanted
the
to bring that
nuances in.
for
That's a good
consideration.
point on the revenue side of it.
yeah,
So bottom line of this, when I was putting this budget together, my goal was to get us to a $500,000 surplus, if you will, to start building that fund balance. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends 2 months of reserves on just the general funds, on the special funds, you know, depending on what they entail, maybe a little more, maybe a little bit less. This is a $10,550,000 budget on expenditures, so that's 16.7% is 1.7 million. The bottom line, taking all these projected revenues and expenditures into account, I come up with $465,781 or 4.4%, as opposed to the 16.7. If we receive the surpluses of projected right now for this year, which was just under 300,000, we get to the 0.7, if you will, but we'd still be $1 million short of what's recommended for a good fund balance for a general fund like this. So obviously more work to do. We're not going to make that up in 1 year. There's absolutely no way that would happen. But over the next 3 or 4 years, it's possible we could reach that suggested 16.7%. So this budget would put us, you know, get us going in the right direction, continue the momentum going in that direction. That being said, there are still some tweaks that we want to look at here and there, but generally what you're seeing right now is by and large where all this stands. Now, if we don't do the agreement with Roscommon on the inmates, that number goes down significantly. It's not to say it's going to put it into a deficit, but when the entire request, all the requests that were accrued from the departments, there was a surplus, but that surplus is 43,321, and that's before there's any consideration of wages. Yeah, so obviously that's not a sustainable amount. So there would still need to be some reductions. So that's where we are right now with it. And again, today was the day that this needed to be presented to you. We've met that goal. But again, keeping in mind, we have August and September to really work on this yet. We're not under pressure right now of having to get this done in a week or two.
August is almost here,
It's coming fast.
faster than fast.
do we still have to get rid of part-time before full?
We'll have to get into the contracts to determine for sure, but recall that this budget doesn't take effect until October 1st. So if there is a change that we'd like to make, we're already going to be at the bargaining table and we can make those proposals and bargain that with the unions. One of the primary aspects of that when we start talking about economics is what we make sure everybody understands what the financial situation of the county is. And that's where we start when we begin talking about the economics. That is a factor. So this budget would take effect after these current contracts expire. We have opportunity to talk across the table about rules like that and how they apply.
So then this, those situations really wouldn't be resolved until those union contracts are final and signed.
Right.
And that
And
could
we're not
take-
gonna know what the pay is gonna be until those
That could take
contracts.
for a long time.
It could. I sense there's some motivation there to get it done. I hope I'm reading that right, and hopefully we can have them all resolved before October 1. We might not, and if we don't, well, there are processes for dealing with that too.
You still have to pass a budget. though.
What was the
We do,
difference between
yeah.
closing the jail and keeping it open?
It's the bulk of that number that you saw here. We did the side-by-side meeting or two ago. When you saw that, when you look at it, just in terms of the jail budget itself and not the rest of the impact across the general fund, I think it was in the $200-some thousand range. What's the
First
difference?
year.
First year, yeah. And bearing in mind that that also includes the PTO payouts and any
Yeah.
unemployment obligation that we'd have, one-time cost. So in the second year,
It'd be more.
obviously that's
Second year. to be
Significantly more.
substantial.
Yeah.
Really quickly, I want to run through the special funds. There's not a whole lot here. They're pretty well self-contained, as I continue to say. First one is on the friend of the court, and that's page 1. You'll see there's page numbers on these.
Oh, and special
Funds. Under friend of the court, they're still working with state formulas. There have been some changes, so you're going to see some change in these numbers. So this gets you in the ballpark, but there'll be some nuance that happens throughout the next couple of months. Also keep in mind on friend of the court, child care fund, and a couple of these others, there is a county general fund obligation that goes into that. That could potentially be reduced if any of these funds have a substantial fund balance. Now, over the years, we have seen that childcare fund balance accrue to where we're comfortable now, at least where it is. Childcare fund is just like any of these other things that you can't predict. We don't know how many cases or how many placements they're going to have in any given year. So we want to make sure there's probably more than that 16.7% fund balance there. I believe there is. If that's the case, and we'll take a look at this, particularly after we get all the formulas down and in place, maybe some of those obligations transfers that we make from the general fund can be reduced, which will save us a little bit more. We'll take a close look at that. I've got a very good working relationship with friend of the court and probate court on these things. So we'll have some pretty healthy conversations about where those ought to be. And again, that's another one that just because there's a fund balance, it's not there for the taking. We can't end up in a situation where we really need the funds and they're not there. So that's why they need that fund balance in those particular funds. On page 5, see the road patrol millage fund. And here's another area where I still need to have conversations with the sheriff and the undersheriff about the structure of this. I know I've been working on staffing structures and moving back and forth. So we still need to have those conversations, but this recommended budget brings over that general fund position and drops it into the road patrol millage fund. Now, you'll see the USDA vehicle grant here is a supplemental revenue, and the very last line at the bottom of page 5, that's where that vehicle purchase is. Moving that position over, unfortunately, leaves us about $23,000 short of being able to purchase this vehicle. But I'm very confident if we really scrutinize some of our line items here, we can make some movement to find that additional $23,000. There is a component in here, the command officer retirement. If we can get the agreement so that we're assured that we account for this all in one line, all as one payment, that number could be reduced, for instance, out of this fund so that we can afford to do the car. So there are just some things that we can play with yet over the next few weeks to help make that happen. But the downside, there's not much fund balance here. We're budgeting right up to the max. And any deviation probably wouldn't be tolerated, but I'm pretty confident with the numbers that we have here and what we're seeing on trends. Some of those ones that have given us issue over the years, like overtime, I think we got a pretty good handle on it in this group, so that we make sure that we don't short it. So there's hope here that we can still make that work and get that grant. But keeping in mind, this fund balance would be relatively small, which is not necessarily a bad thing.
I have one question. Do we have any retirements in writing that says they're actually gonna retire?
We believe we do.
Really? What's the date?
In the fiscal year.
September 30th then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tracy, correct me if you know.
That's the date I have, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to double check. I thought we did, but I wasn't sure.
On page 7, we have the Indigent Defense Fund. These numbers they're all fresh. These are the numbers that we know that we'll are eligible for with the Indigent Defense Grant. Thing I want to point out here, though, under the grant, we can use some of these funds to offset the cost of a bailiff/corrections officer in the courts on days when qualified individuals are in court. So if there's somebody being represented by an indigent defense attorney, some of these monies can be used to make sure that corrections is there to keep things under control. So we'll work with probably Will in this case to.
So you probably have to amend the grant application.
Right. But that's a bureaucratic exercise. We can handle that. But there's potential for additional funds that'll help offset some of the costs for that purpose. It was suggested that we consider a number of changes with how we do bailiffs and how we work in coordination with the corrections officers. And we'll have those conversations too to see if they'll work out. There's also, I have concerns about how we pay our security and our bailiffs. Right now, they either receive a half-day pay or a full-day pay, which is all well and good. But if somebody works over that 40-hour threshold, which is certainly within the realm of possibilities, we are still required to pay overtime on that. Perhaps a better model would be to establish the hourly rate that would be equal to what they're seeing now for those half-time or half-day or full-day rates. But then we'd be able to catch any overtime and make sure that we are satisfying our obligations and not opening ourselves up to a wage and audit division visit and potentially fines for not doing it correctly. So we've got the players within the organization here to have that conversation, and we may see some structural change in how we deal with that moving forward. We mentioned the child care fund. Veterans Office, this is dependent on a millage proposal in August, so we may have to revisit this if that millage does not pass.
What page is it on?
It was on page 11. Get right toward the middle there, veterans millage revenue.
Yep.
On the tax reversions, those are pretty standard. Childcare. Childcare. Nothing there yet. They're still working the formulas to make sure that everything that we budgeted here is consistent with what the state formulas are. There was some change in there, again, working in our favor over the last year. Also keeping in mind, that's one fund that has a large fund balance. And so we could take another look at that to make sure the contribution that comes from the general fund is not only that it's adequate, but that it's not more than what we necessarily need to put in.
Yeah.
Right,
So,
okay.
under transit, also subject to millage. This is one that if this millage fails, we will definitely be revisiting this fund just to make sure that we've got the funds necessary to operate the way that we want to. One other aspect here was brought up at Transit Committee this morning is the idea of moving some of our part-time drivers to full-time, and this would help stabilize the staffing level at Transit.
Yeah.
Certainly makes sense to consider that. And when you look at what we're paying on our part-time drivers right now, that's a pretty hefty sum. The thinking is if it were full-time and with benefits, that we would get more qualified people who would be willing to do this as a job, full 40 hours a week. And that certainly makes sense. So those are conversations we're going to continue to have between now and the time you're asked to adopt this budget. Don't know for sure if it's going to work, but I thought was a very good idea that was presented there today, and something
Yeah.
definitely worth.
They have to have the right certifications too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And with a new director, this is a great opportunity to get him
Yes,
hip
it
deep
is.
into the budget process and
Yeah.
start crunching numbers and how all it works. And working with the system we have. So that is the nickel tour of the special funds. Like I said, most of these, they're not all that dynamic. The revenues come in and we budget accordingly, and that's it. There aren't any of our special funds that are having a particularly difficult time with fund balances. They're all pretty decent. Future versions of this, I will include that fund balance line on the bottom. So I've got to get into the last year's audit to make sure that all the numbers are accurate. We'll then factor that in with the revenues and expenses, and you can see what we'll expect at the end of the fiscal year and be able to confirm that the fund balances are where you're comfortable. A lot to throw at you in one night, and then we'll start taking these piece by piece, and as future meetings occur, we can talk about the things you want to focus on.
I get to start all over doing line by line. I did it in the last one, then I see it changed, so I gotta start all over again. Any questions? Any comments? Any questions? Any comments? Anybody?
This over. You have some printed copies already?
I do. I have some with me.
All right.
I'd like to take a printed copy too for myself and for Commissioner David. I'll drop it off at our place.
Yep. I anticipated that, so we're all set.
All right. So we're through everything now?
I think we are.
Any commissioner?
No, there's one other item. The very last document on here, our conversations last time, you wanted to see the deferred felon revenue trend. And
Oh, yeah.
that's on that very last page. You can see it going back to 2018 and
Last
page. Yeah, the significant drop off during COVID and then recovery.
Is that kind of based on the prisoners that we have in there right now?
Right, yeah. It's just for information at this point, unless you had some specific questions about it, but these are audited numbers, and then the year.
Is Dan still doing that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's nice we have them. That's it.
Wait a minute.
Commissioner comments? Commissioner Wiltie?
So we had our ribbon cutting ceremony this morning at the transit for Celebrate Ogemaw. You guys probably see a lot of the transit buses now are wrapped with a lot of the local events that are on throughout the county. They really do look really nice. The company that's doing a really good job, and we will make sure that we continue to do that. That was a really cool event this morning. We had the West Branch Chamber was there when they did the ribbon cutting. Our new director will be starting on Monday, the 22nd. So we're excited about that. The new building out there, it looks pretty big from the road, but once you get in it, it's really big and it's nice. It's going to help with the morale of our transit drivers, especially in the wintertime. They don't have to come to work with, snow on their buses and what have you. So.
And they have to take all that snow off too.
And again, that was paid with grant money and local contractors. So that was a good win for the county. Again, we don't have a lot of those right now, so it's nice when we do get them. This past Sunday, we had Fun in the Sun over at Elbow Lake Park. That's our Optimist Club, which is an absolutely fantastic group of people. Over 200 kids again. It's just an absolute great event over there. A couple of years now, I've been working with a couple other people behind the grill and doing hot dogs, and it's a lot of fun and just a great event. The Optimist Club's great. They do a lot of
They do a lot of things for the kids over there.
A lot of real good things. This past Monday, I was up in Roscommon for the Northern Michigan Commissioners Association. Again, it's a great time to network with other counties, and our main topics were, it's kind of a really nice meeting because it was more of a roundtable with the commissioners, and we talked about jail costs and the struggles and challenges other counties are having with their jails. That was some really good conversation. And then we talked about housing. Next month, we're gonna talk about recycling. So that's been an on and off topic now, obviously, getting really big. So, I will make sure to keep attending those. Again, it's a great opportunity to see what some of these other counties around us are doing. And, other than that, that's it. Again, looking at this today, we have some really, really big decisions to make. My first term as commissioner, I knew we were financially as a county in a bad position when I was coming to some meetings before I became commissioner. And I knew that a lot of changes were going to have to be made. And the bottom line is we've just got to be able to financially get in a position where our county is sustainable, where we're offering services we can afford. And for years and years and years, we haven't done that. We're the ones that are now pushed right in the corner, walls right in front of our face. And what do? What the decisions that we make? We're broke. We can't continue to be broke. So these are very, very hard decisions, and I'm not sleeping good at night. Stuff is not easy. This is tough. This is real tough stuff, but we have to keep moving forward. We got to stay course. We've got to get this county in a financial position that's going to create sustainability. We absolutely have to do that.
I know.
That's all I have for today.
Commissioner Scott?
Well, we started out back a few years ago. I came on board. One of my biggest things was to get an administrator in place. We had to have a CEO running the company, and we overturned a lot of rocks, and we found a lot of problems. And I've heard everybody say, well, why doesn't this guy fix our problems? And here it is right here. This is a balanced budget with a fund balance. And we're not relying on that tax revolving fund that we've been sucking off of for the last 15, 20 years. We've been taking it off every year since I've been here. And here we are, we're there. Now we got to make a decision. He doesn't make that decision. That's all I got to say.
Commissioner Mayhew?
No.
So balanced budget, but some of these, it's nice to see, but some of these figures are unknown right now. So we really don't know if it's balanced or not. And it will take until we find out what the figures are gonna be, especially with negotiations and also with the state funding that comes in. So it's still kind of up in the air. It's balanced right now. It's not to say that these numbers aren't gonna change in the real near future.
I think you can rest assured they will change, okay?
Yeah.
So the goal here is to make sure that we continue to have a balanced budget at the end of all these conversations, and hopefully, again, building that fund balance.
So basically, this is a dynamic
Budget.
yeah, well,
Every budget is.
I know.
And you see earlier tonight, we did third quarter adjustments. So even after the budget year starts, we're still making adjustments.
I know that,
As it moves
yeah.
forward. So, yeah.
Money coming in we didn't expect, and money that didn't come in.
Yeah,
And then there's a lot of times you build budgets relying on departments to bring you money in. And when they don't,
and you have to
well,
adjust
then
again.
you have to make up that money some other place.
Yeah, that's true. So one other comment I have is we had good news. We had an airport meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're gonna start redoing the runway August 12th, is that my understanding, yeah?
Right.
So we're pretty excited about that. So it'll probably take what, they say 6 weeks?
6 weeks.
6 weeks to complete that, so So we're looking forward to that. You know, there's some other things we're looking at too, as far as the grounds around it too, for future use, so. So that was the meeting I had, and Mr. Wilson's already talked about the transport. We all have to be on the same, but meetings, Craig and I and Mr. Wilson and I, so. So any other comments from, do we have any comments from the public here? Any public comment? Yes, please come forward. Hi, Sheriff Gilbert.
Hi. I just, I'm gonna pull this out. I just want to say one thing for the record. And it's something that we need to consider. It's concerning the jail. Soft on crime, the jail reform, it's not here to stay. Because the American people are sick and tired of protecting these criminals. I read it, I see it. And the reason why I'm saying this is because last month, our average for our inmates were 33. So when this soft on crime, this jail reform leaves us, and it's gonna leave us probably in a few months, I'm hoping. That number is gonna increase of inmates being put in that jail. And when that happens, the increase of paying for them inmates is gonna go up. The medical is gonna go up. The transport is gonna go up. So I want you to really think about that, because this soft on crime, the American people are sick and tired of this crap. And it's coming. So you're basing these numbers on them, you're basing your cost on these low numbers that we have right now.
Yep.
We have the state-of-the-art jail over there that was built for the future. Our county is growing hand over fist, day to day, pulling people in here. And by God, if they break the law in Ogemaw County, they're gonna go to jail. And what's gonna happen, and what fears me to death, is that when we do that, my road patrol, which I'm struggling right now to have bodies. I'm struggling. What's gonna happen is that my people are gonna get pulled off the road that are protecting our citizens, and they're gonna have to go up to Roscommon to bring an inmate up there, leaving our county wide open for home invasions, or anything else. And we cannot depend on the state police, because they have some gaps in their stuff too. I'm here to tell you, and I won't get into that, but we, as Ogemaw County, have to take care of our own people. You know, I'm struggling right now because last year we laid 3 deputies off. I'm struggling with that. If I hadn't 3 deputies to plug in that schedule right now, I'd be fine. But on top of that, I had 1 deputy go to Lansing, go back home, which is fine. And we all know what happened to the other deputy that is gone now. Good riddance. So I'm down 5. My scheduling sucks. I hate to say that word, but it's the truth.
It does.
It does. Do I like doing it? No. We are making things happen, and things is not getting unsolved and unresponded. We're working it. It's working a hell of a lot better than I thought it would, to be honest with you. I thought we'd do this for a couple of weeks ago, and I'm pulling it off. But it's working. I believe my overtime is being controlled. It's working. The response to my people, and when I say my people, my citizens that elected me as sheriff, my people are getting the results that they need when they need a
You're
cop.
addressing the board. You're addressing the board.
They're getting it. So
Look at us.
You're addressing the board.
I'm addressing everybody because I'm looking right there too.
You're addressing the board.
Oh, boy.
Come on, let's not get,
But anyway, that's my concern with this jail. We have to think about this growth of this county. This county is growing and it's gonna continue to grow. And that's all I have. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Great. Any other public comment? Any other public comment on Zoom? No public comment.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second to that? Motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed. Okay, no. Go on, yes. Judges putting that on. That's my concern.
Roger, did you want a hard copy?
Yeah.
That's general and the special.
We're off.
We cover all.